Good morning, everyone. My name is Gabriel Olivella. I'm the coordinator of programs and events of the BC Council for International Education, and it is my pleasure to welcome you today to today's webinar entitled Supporting the Well-Being of International Students in K-12 Schools in British Columbia. So before we begin, I would first like to acknowledge the territory from which I speak to you today, and that is the unceded, ancestral and overlapping territories of the Coast Salish peoples of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. And with this, I want to recognize and emphasize on the word unceded and acknowledge the work that I need and that the institutions that we work for have ahead to aim for equity and justice with the First Nations peoples of the territories on which we reside. So now I'd like to go through a few housekeeping items. But before that, I'd like to just briefly remind everyone that BCCIE stands for the BC Council for International Education, and that we are a provincial agency under the Ministry of Advanced Education and Skills Training, advancing the interest of international education throughout the entire education sector in British Columbia, including the K-12, higher education, and the language sector. And now for the housekeeping items, I'd just like to remind everyone that microphones are muted at this time and they will remain muted throughout the presentation and Q&A. So we invite you to ask questions and to share your comments, but you can do that by typing them in the Q&A function or in the chat function. So they're slightly different. The chat function is for comments and the Q&A function is for questions, because the Q&A function is special in that you can upvote those questions, so that works for us to know which questions have more relevance or are more important to you. So we welcome you to ask those questions or to send those questions as well. If you require any technical assistance today, please pop your questions in the chat box and we will do our best to help you. And on that note, I'd like to thank my colleague Terry Lynn, who will be helping me today with any technical questions that you may have. And just a quick reminder, if you experience any video or audio lagging, Zoom does offer the option of calling in. And so this allows you to dial in by phone while maintaining the computer access to video. Just let us know if you have any questions and we will get to your inquiry. So I'd like to introduce today's speakers. We got Danielle Carter-Sullivan, who works at the Ministry of Education as the Director of Mental Health. We also got Kim Weatherby, who is a school health promotion consultant and has worked in this area for more than 15 years with roles at the local, provincial, national levels in nonprofits and government. Over the years, she has worked a wide range of health promotion materials targeting both students and educators. We also have Rhonda Bell, who is currently a district principal for the Qualicum International Students Program and is an executive member of IPSI. We also have Laura Schwartfiger, who is the district principal of international student programs in Souk School District, and she has worked in this district since 2009. And we also have Karen Simons, who has worked in international student programs for the past 7 years as principal of student support and now director of the program. She has also been a counselor, counseling department head, and coordinator of inquiry at the North Delta Secondary School. So with that, I'd like to thank all the panelists for joining us today. And now I'd like to pass it over to Danielle from the Ministry of Education for the first presentation. Thanks everyone, and Danny, over to you.
Hello, welcome, and thank you for having me here today. I'd like to start off by acknowledging first off that with gratitude, I am living, working, and playing on the traditional territory of the Lekwungen speaking peoples of the Songhees and the Esquimalt First Nation, or Victoria, and in the spirit of reconciliation. Oh, that's not helpful. I hope you can't hear that. The printer's going off. In the spirit of reconciliation, just acknowledging that I come to this land and each day try and practice that sense of curiosity, that sense of understanding, that sense of openness towards learning as much as I can about the land and the peoples that were here before us. I have about 10 minutes, and so Gabriel, please give me a nudge if necessary. If I'm going over a little bit, I'll also watch my time. I'm going to run through a couple of key pieces around the work that the Minister of Education has been undertaking over the last couple of years, but I'm really trying to make it as well useful for the folks that are on the line. So please use the question and chat function if you have any questions as we go through. Normally, if we were in person, I would encourage this to be an open conversation and have people fire questions at me as we go, because I think that makes it more meaningful for you. And I also invite Kim Weatherby, who's here with us as well today, to really stop me as we go, Kim. Just jump in, because I think it's helpful if there's a piece that I'm going through that really relates to the work that you've done as well. So off we go. So if folks are not familiar with this, the Ministry of Education has what's called our Erase strategy and our Erase website. And Gabriel's going to put the link up to the Erase website in the chat feature as well. So the Erase strategy has a 5-year plan attached to it, and we're looking at a couple of 4 key areas. So we really focus on bullying and violence, critical incident support. We've introduced child and youth mental health supports, and we also have a section on the Erase site around sexual orientation and gender identity. So in 2018-19, we really did a significant refresh on Erase to introduce some of these emerging elements that really are coming up within the school district. So the 2 here are that child and youth mental health support and the sexual orientation, gender identity, are commonly referred to as SOGI. We've also included more recently information in there around the substance use. We have some information and some new information coming around suicide and life promotion. So we continue to evolve that site. So I encourage you to reference it. Has tremendous amount of resources and supports available to educators, students, and families. So not only do we use it within the school system, but you know, as a mom and enduring some of these things with teenage children, I've used it myself. So I think it's a really valuable resource to highlight for folks. The work that we do really comes from a relatively new document. This came out in 2019. It's called A Pathway to Hope. If you are interested in reading sort of government publications, The Pathway to Hope is a 10-year vision about mental health and addictions for people across BC. And embedded within the pathway are 4 key pillars. And the pillar that we're linked to at the Ministry of Education is the improving wellness for children, youth, and adults. And a significant amount of work has been done underneath this pillar over the course of the last couple of years. And it's led us to the development within the ministry of what we call the mental health strategy. So the Pathway to Hope, again, provides that vision and really emphasizes how mental health is a key priority for government. And it will give you some sense around what are the suite of initiatives that have come to light in the last few years that really might be resources that you can tap into. So the mental health in schools strategy, so great to be able to launch this in September of 2020, quite timely given all of the nuances of, you know, working in the midst of a pandemic. We use the Pathway Hope and the Erase strategy as our guiding documents for the work, and created 3 key elements to our strategy. The first one being compassionate systems leadership, the second being capacity building, and then the third looking at mental health in the classroom. And so, as I said, with the creation of the pathway, government also created a ministry dedicated to mental health and addictions. And for the Minister of Education specifically, we have had funding to the tune of about 13.9 million that's gone out to school districts and independent schools to support mental health activities. Spanning over the course of 4 years. So we're in year 3 with 1 year left, but a significant amount of funding as well going out. And we have a great grant program where we're actually encouraging schools to look at their data, to look at the needs and the pieces that are relevant within their own communities, and then using the funds to create activities. So again, there's an opportunity there, I think, for folks to really look at how there's that intersection with the international students, and to see if there are activities that they can be tapping into, or activities that may support them really quite specifically. The mental health in school strategy was also really co-created, is essentially how we like to frame it. So we did a tremendous amount of consultation across the school sector, and asked folks like, what does mental health mean for you? What are the activities? What's going to be meaningful for you in the work as we move forward? And so it really is a collection of the voices from this system. We were really purposeful in the ministry of encouraging it to be a document that was collaborative, and not just the ministry saying, here's what we think the system needs, and now we're going to roll this out for you all to participate. So again, we would hope, and I think most folks, if not everyone within the school system, should be able to see themselves in it. See, there's a question. I'm just going to stop. Mental health aid, I found. Do you know if there's any mental health first aid training? Perhaps I'm going to answer that when I come back. So really just some highlights around the strategy itself, that we're really looking at that whole system approach. We focus on positive mental health within the education system, and that we really want this to be an element that's embedded across every classroom. It's not just a course that you take at some point in your high school, that those pieces of mental health and well-being are embedded across every classroom and a part of all discussions moving forward. I use this, and I always am challenged around the notion that children don't come in triangles, nor do they come in layers. But when we started to look at unpacking the mental health within BC, it was really apparent there's a tremendous amount of work and a tremendous amount of support available in the system. So it was really starting to get a sense of who's doing what and who's in what lane. So we committed within the education system, and you'll see that embedded throughout the strategy as well, that our work is around that leadership piece, and we're really focused on compassionate systems leadership and supporting adult well-being in the system, and that our work in education is around mental health promotion. And you'll see by the sort of reverse of the triangles is the recognition that as students require more intensive support, prevention and intervention supports, it really then is that transition into working with some of the other ministries as well as those community supports. So for the Ministry of Education, we really are focused on that mental health promotion piece, recognizing that those transitions will happen in the school system, and ensuring that we're working collaboratively with all of those other supports. Just really quickly, because then I'm going to open up the floor and take any questions that might come up. The mental health in school strategy, and the erase link that will be posted will take you into the strategy as well. If you look under the mental health section, we've got some really key action items that we're focused on for the course of the next couple of years. I mentioned being really focused on adult well-being and the recognition of that contagion within the system. So supporting adults to be, really supported within the system, and then that translates really nicely within the classroom. We're looking at continuing to do some system leadership training. We have work already started in this area in our early learning sector, and it also aligns with the integrated service delivery model, which is part of the Pathway to Hope activities. This is the capacity building section. Again, continuing to looking at trends in practice and data and research. We're really seeing this being a key focus during the pandemic. There's a tremendous amount of research out there. What are the sources that we are going to use within the Ministry of Education that best represent the greatest population, and really relate nicely to the impacts that pandemic is having on students. We're in the process of developing a lead network for mental health across all of the school districts. And we continue to work with students and families to help have that and host that discussion around what's important around mental health. The last section is mental health in the classroom, and this really is about using curriculum. We do have curriculum embedded within BC as part of our refresh or the transformation of curriculum that actually identifies mental health and well-being as part of the curriculum. So it gives teachers and educators the opportunity to really talk about mental health as part of their day-to-day activities. And I will just end here on this picture, which I love and adore, and that is that for all of us, and us especially, we go back to what is our key purpose, and that is really holding children in the center of all we do. So I'm going to stop sharing and open the floor and see if there are any kind of questions or comments. And I think I'm close to time.
Yes, you are. Thanks, Dan. So I think you mentioned you're open to taking one or two questions. So I suggest if someone else has any questions to pop them in the chat box. We can take about 2 questions at this time before moving on to the next presentation. And we will also have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. So we will have more time for Q&A as well. So Denny, there is a question on the question box right now from Joanne. Do you want to read the question and address that?
Yeah, so Joanne has said, I previously taught in the UK, lots of staff and also students did training in mental health first aid through Mental Health First Aid England. I have found, okay, do you know if there is any mental health first aid training workshops aimed for upskilling students? I'd have to dig in, Joanne. We've really taken the perspective from the ministry at not necessarily creating a repository of links and been really conscious about saying to school districts, we're not going to tell you what program it is specifically that you need. There is no silver bullet. It's going to be really important that you look specifically at where are the gaps and opportunities within your school district, and then look at the program supports and resources that'll best meet that need. So I do know that there is some first aid training. Kim Weatherby could probably jump in. She's a guru in knowing this. And I know she's created some repository elements as well, but there is some first aid training. So it would just be a matter of looking it up and seeing if it's available specifically.
Yeah, it is. It's Kim. I think there is training around Canada on mental health first aid, but Danny, perhaps a place to refer people to is the work that UBC has done around the mental health literacy training. That's really caught on and is very popular in BC and well received.
Yeah. And on the Array site, and Kim, I think we'll have some information and links as well, is we've provided links to a number of different organizations, UBC being one of them, that have repositories around social emotional learning. So those links are there. There's also a site called ShareEd BC that is a great site for accessing resources. And lots of people post on that site to say, educators that say, this is a great program, I've done it with my students, here's some key elements to it. So Share IBC is another element, and again, those are being actually added at any point now, as far because we're doing a bit of a minor refresh on the Array site. Where can folks access information on the grants available? The grants go out directly to school districts. So it's not a process whereby somebody can actually apply and say, can I get a grant? Those grants are an automatic. We had 3.75 million issued in grants last year to school districts in FISA BC, and they go out directly, like in September, to the school districts to say, here's your allotment for the year. Please plan activities that align for your particular school district. So those grants are not an application process, they're an automatic and go out to school districts on an annual basis. We have one more year left on that commitment. And then beyond that, we're negotiating at this point. So I hope that helps.
Thanks, Danny, for your information.
Any other questions?
I suggest at this point, if folks can still type your questions in the Q&A box, and then we can get to those questions at the end of the other presentations so that we allow enough time for that. So with that, I would invite Kim to start your presentation. And Kim, over to you. Thank you so much.
Gabriel, is the screen okay?
Yes, it looks great.
Perfect. Good morning, everyone. I, like Danielle, am speaking to you from the unceded traditional lands of the Lekwungen speaking people, the Songhees and Esquimalt First Nations. Thank you for making time to be with us this morning. We are going to be speaking to you about the Ministry of Education's Health and Wellness Guidelines for International Students. The guideline materials we have developed are meant to help you better support the health and well-being of your international students. My expertise is in school health promotion, particularly around mental health and wellness. You are the experts in international students. The materials we have developed are meant to extend your knowledge and experience, not to replace it. We think of it as adding new tools to your toolkit. This is the flow of our presentation today. First, I'll speak about the consultation process we used to develop the materials, then a quick overview of the guidelines. Then I'll talk about the strategies that cross-cut the guidelines. We'll take a look at the guideline documents in a bit more depth, and then I will turn things over to my colleagues, Rhonda, Laura, and Karen, who will share their wisdom on how the guidelines might contribute to student well-being in your district or school. And then we'll wrap things up with some questions. The ministry launched the initial work on the guidelines in September of 2020. As I said, my expertise is in school health promotion, not international student programs, so it was important to have an advisory committee to guide the work. My colleagues Rhonda Bell from Qualicum, Laura Schwartfiger from SUC, and Karen Simons from Delta were that advisory committee, and their guidance has been invaluable as we develop these materials. To start the process, we brainstormed ideas of what might be needed. Then we conducted key informant interviews with staff from international student programs in district and independent schools and homestay providers. Using their feedback, we developed a survey which was distributed to stakeholders in October. We received 119 responses from people in a wide range of roles and regions of the province. The survey provided rich information and set the direction for our work. Based on the survey data, the key informant interviews, and the advice of the advisory committee, we selected the resources to be developed. The content for the resources was researched, and the resources developed. The draft resources were reviewed by the advisory committee, some of their school district colleagues, the Ministry of Education, and others. Revisions were made based on the feedback and the final documents produced. For phase 2, which started in February this year, we went back to the survey results and looked at the priority areas that we hadn't addressed in the first phase. The advisory committee once again shaped what the materials would look like and what topics would be included. The phase 2 resources have been developed and reviewed, and I'm currently working on making the revisions. In phase 1, we developed 3 documents: Understanding Homesickness and Acculturation Stress, Understanding Mental Health and Wellbeing from an East Asian perspective, and from a Latin American perspective. As I said, we are currently finishing up work on phase 2, where we have developed a health and wellness resource directory and 3 worksheets for collaborative discussions with students on experiencing low mood, feeling stressed, and building resilience. All of the documents are based on academic research and best available evidence and are meant to complement and extend what you already know about the international students that you work with. Before we go any further, I want to highlight the 6 cross-cutting themes that you will see repeatedly in this presentation. They're programs-wide strategies that support the well-being of your international students and promote the greatest support for the students that need it the most. With the possible exception of English language skills, these are strategies that every school and district in the province are using to support the well-being of all students. Looking at them with fresh eyes and seeing how you might build on what you are already doing can help you better support your students. Linking back to Danielle's presentation, I would say that the cross-cutting strategies and all of the things that we are encouraging within the guidelines is to move away from having to deal with interventions and moving kind of down the triangles in the pyramid to a place where we're doing prevention and promotion. So there are less crises, there are less kids who are having serious problems. So the first strategy is fostering intentional connections, and this is crucial. Having connections to other students and adults at school is even more important for international students than it is for local students. They are adapting to a different environment without having their family and friends nearby, and that is very stressful. Research tells us that students who feel that there are 2 or more adults at school who care about them have better outcomes at school and in life. And that's why in the BC Student Learning Survey, there's a question specifically about how many adults you're connected with at school. So having strong connections to adults also increases the odds that students will reach out to one of their trusted adults if they need help. Peer relationships with other students are also important. They can be encouraged through sports and other interest groups, as well as through classroom strategies. Infuse mental well-being throughout your program in pre-arrival processes and materials, in the orientation process, and by continually reinforcing it throughout the student's stay. The goals are to normalize conversations about mental well-being, encourage students to manage their own stress and wellness, for students to know how and who to reach out to when they need help, and for the supporting adults to know what to do when the students reach out. Encourage healthy lifestyles. Reinforce that healthy eating, regular physical activity, healthy relationships, good sleep habits, and limiting screen time contribute to mental well-being. Build on the health promotion work that your school and district are already doing. For example, a very easy one is to weave Bell Let's Talk program in January into your program. So talk about it actively with the students, make it a part of what you're doing with your international students. Help students develop life skills. Executive function, self-regulation, social-emotional learning, and coping skills are the skills that help students bounce back from adversity. Also consider that international students may not have had the same exposure to social-emotional learning as other BC students and may be less equipped to speak about and manage their emotions and well-being. Work with your district's well-being lead or SEL classroom teachers to understand how SEL skills are being taught in your district and school. And remember that our new curriculum has been in place for elementary students for quite a few years, and many of these skills are embedded into the fabric of the program. So there really may be some gaps for your international students who may not have been exposed to that. Build the capacity of program staff so they are confident and comfortable speaking about mental well-being and effective strategies for managing it. Again, draw on your district's expertise, including counselors, SEL teachers, and district well-being leads. Explore training opportunities such as the UBC Teach Mental Health Literacy, that's an online free program that I mentioned earlier, or there's also some in-person programs available. Sorry. Oh, wow. Here we go. Sorry. Improve English language skills. I know this is something that is already a priority in your programs, but it's important to point out that poor English language skills are a barrier to connections, and that has mental health implications. So embedding these 6 strategies across your program from pre-arrival to orientation and through ongoing support will help your international students be successful and achieve their goals. Over time, it will also reduce the number and severity of crises you're dealing with. And that's those interventions at the top of the pyramid that Danny had in her diagram. So now we're going to look a little more deeply at the materials that make up the guidelines. The first one that we will look at is a homesickness and acculturation stress document. It includes the symptoms, the factors that influence how much students are affected by it, strategies to address it, and resources for students and the adults who support them. Homesickness and acculturation stress, which is also known as culture shock, are separate but closely linked phenomena. With homesickness, the student is missing family, friends, and that sense of belonging that they have at home. Acculturation stress is the stress of adapting to a new environment and culture. The student is dealing with a new school and teaching methods, living away from home, new food, climate, cultural norms, and often language, as well as the need to develop a new support system and friendships. So even the students who are most excited about the experience feel the stress of so many changes. And you can see that homesickness is usually short-lived, so weeks to a couple of months, and acculturation stress can last for much longer because it's all about the stress of adapting to a new environment. So I'm sure all of this is pretty familiar ground for most of you, but what may be different is that researchers are no longer talking about the U or W curve of culture shock that we heard about 10 or 15 years ago. Current research from the last few years is highlighting that stress on students is greatest when they arrive, even when they're really excited about coming. The researchers have also identified that the need for support for students is greatest in the beginning. The symptoms of homesickness and acculturation stress are largely the same. You probably are very familiar with them. Loss of appetite, infections, digestive issues, headaches, dizziness, anxiousness, worrying, easily irritated, not going to class, loneliness, stress symptoms like difficulty concentrating and making decisions, feeling overwhelmed or frustrated, and depressive symptoms like being self-critical, spending less time with friends, or putting less effort into school. A couple of additional symptoms are more associated with homesickness: persistent ruminating about home, negative thoughts about the environment, apathy, lethargy, and little interest in the new environment. The effects of homesickness and acculturation stress vary based on risk and protective factors. The risk factors include a student's personality, with students who are neurotic or perfectionist struggling more, age, with younger students being more affected, English language proficiency, perceived prejudice or discrimination. Their relationships with their family can also be a risk factor. Example, if they have either very strict parents with high expectations or overly permissive parents, that can contribute to homesickness and acculturation stress. Protective factors that reduce homesickness and acculturation stress include having strong support networks. These give students a sense of control and the ability to cope in their new environment. Students can receive support from a variety of sources: their family, local and distant friends, teachers, program staff, and their homestay family. Successfully making new connections and friends reduces acculturation stress. By developing relationships with local people, students learn about the cultural norms and expectations, which supports their cross-cultural adjustment. A lack of local connections and friends can contribute to loneliness, stress, isolation, and homesickness. The program-wide strategies are the overarching themes that I showed you before, with some nuances. So we want to continually foster connection. So social interactions can have a direct impact on homesickness. So focus on building connections in the first few months when students are most vulnerable. At program events, include activities that foster relationships among students and between students and program staff and other adults. Work with classroom teachers to facilitate opportunities for international students to get to know their Canadian peers, and encourage international students to participate in extracurricular activities. Friendships with other international students can lessen homesickness and make students feel more connected. Embed mental well-being. In the case of dealing with homesickness and acculturation stress, the focus is on building strong support systems from the start. Students are most vulnerable in the first few weeks and months, and positive first impressions and experiences where they feel welcomed, connected, and well supported can set them up for success. Use pre-arrival processes that connect them with their new support system before they arrive, such as pre-arrival phone calls, Zoom sessions to start making connections with staff and homestay families. Also ensure that your orientation process includes a focus on building connections and introduces everyday mental well-being strategies. Introducing these everyday practices will help normalize mental health conversations and build student skills. In the months after, continue to remind students about available supports because they probably forgot everything you told them at orientation. And also ensure that staff members are doing regular well-being check-ins. Remember that you want 2 adults connected to every student. Encourage students to maintain a healthy lifestyle. Eating well, regular physical activity, enough sleep, and managing screen time can help students manage their stress and homesickness more effectively. When we talk about specific life skills for homesickness and acculturation stress, we are talking about improving coping skills, such as engaging in social and physical activities or by talking to a trusted peer or adult. Cognitive behavior therapy, mindfulness, and other anxiety and stress management techniques can also be beneficial. Strengthen language skills. Ensure supports are in place to improve English language skills. I'm sure you're already doing this, but it's worth saying again. Improving their skills makes it easier to make friends with local students, fit in better, and helps them be more successful in school. Next, we're going to look at the 2 Understanding Mental Health from a Culture Perspective documents. The documents are based on academic research between 2010 and 2020. There's large diversity within countries, regions, and international students may not look exactly like average citizens. They may be more likely to be affluent and may have better educated families. So not everything in the document is going to apply to every single student. Remember, research is generally looking across large populations. So remember that you are the expert and use the findings to expand your knowledge, not to replace what you already know. So the documents include some cultural context, a discussion of the culture's understanding of mental health problems, and approaches to mental health treatment. It also provides strategies for individual students and for your overall program, and a list of resources for the students and the adults who support them. The documents focus on Latin America, and that's South and Central America and Mexico, and East Asia, China, Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, and Hong Kong. We focused on these countries and regions because BC has a significant number of international students from these regions, and there is available research for those countries. For example, someone suggested that we include in Vietnam in the list, but unfortunately, there's not much academic research in English around the mental health perspectives of Vietnamese people. When we look at overall cultural perspectives, we see that Canada is largely an individualistic society. East Asian and Latin American cultures are both more collectivist societies, and they put the needs of a family before the needs of an individual. Protecting family reputation can be very important in those cultures. And in Latin America, gender roles tend to be more traditional, with men taking a more dominant role in the family and in society as well. When we think about the causes of mental illness, in Canada, we believe that mental health problems are caused by a combination of genetic, biological, personality, and environmental factors, and that anyone can have a mental health problem. In East Asian countries, many people believe that mental health problems are caused by an imbalance, yin-yang, or personality traits. In Latin America, while beliefs are changing, some people believe that mental health problems are caused by bad character or the way that someone was brought up. In terms of supports for mental health problems, in Canada, counseling and self-help strategies are commonplace and well accepted. In East Asian countries, again, the family needs are typically put before the needs of an individual, and students may not be used to talking about emotional problems, and their symptoms may manifest as physical ones. Counseling may be a hard sell as it brings shame to the family, but self-help strategies are more readily accepted. In Latin America, people are used to seeking support and counsel from family, friends, and clergy, but may also be open to counseling. Males may hide issues as they may perceive it as undermining their role as a future breadwinner and head of the family. So when you think about the cultural perspectives and beliefs around causes, you can see that it can be challenging to find culturally appropriate ways to support international students who are struggling with mental health problems. While mental health and well-being is a growing concern for all students, international students face additional challenges. So some individual strategies to use to support your students with mental health problems: routine mental wellness check-ins. So as we said earlier, make mental health discussions routine and start doing that from the moment they arrive. So in the resource, we've provided a link to a mental health check-in, just a few questions that allow you to start a conversation with a student about mental health, just checking in to see how they're doing, what's going well and what is not. Catch problems early. So again, thinking back to Danny's pyramid, we want to be not dealing with big problems. We want to be seeing things as they're starting to happen. So on the previous slide, we talked about self-help strategies for East Asian students. Those strategies can be effective if you identify a problem early. So when kids are starting to be stressed or starting to struggle, there are things you can do. But when a student continues their mental health problem, increases and continues, and in a crisis mode, self-help strategies generally are not effective. Use your cultural knowledge. So take what you already know and add to it what you can learn through these materials, and use that knowledge to have your conversations with students. So thinking about a student from China, it's probably not the best idea to go in assertively saying that they need counseling. So you want to think about what you know about their culture and what's likely to make them more receptive to getting some support. So reach out to others working with students, talk to their teachers, find out what they are saying and seeing. Effective program-wide strategies are the same ones that you have seen before. Foster intentional connections, again, connections with two adults. Build mental wellness into your program. We've talked about building into your pre-arrival and orientation processes by reinforcing it throughout their stay. One other thing that you will want to think about is developing a plan or a protocol for how you will deal with emerging issues. So if you're alert to them and consistently take prompt action, you can really reduce the number of and severity of cases that you have to deal with. So think about, collectively get together and think about, okay, what do we want to do when we start seeing issues? What are we looking for and how are we going to handle them? Reinforce healthy habits. And that is appropriate for every culture. Physical activity, healthy eating, good sleep habits, and managing technology use all contribute to mental health. When we talk about life skills around mental health, the focus is on bolstering social-emotional learning skills. Canadian students, particularly in BC, have learned about emotions and self-regulation in elementary school. Consider whether your international student may have a gap in this area, and if so, how you might address that. Building staff capacity, we've already talked about this. Ensure that your program staff and other adults have the professional learning to support them in being comfortable in talking about mental health and effective strategies for addressing it. Now we are going to begin to talk about the materials that we've developed in phase 2. We're just finishing up work on these documents and they'll be available in the coming months. We've developed 3 sets of collaborative worksheets that are meant to facilitate discussions between a student and an adult, and that could be program staff, counselor, teacher, etc. And so on the left of your screen, you're going to see, you will see the student worksheet. It's a 1-page document with 5 key points and practical tips and a place to make plans to address each point. For many international students, the worksheet will be available in their home language. We'll be translating the student worksheets into Mandarin, Japanese, Korean, and Vietnamese. Students who speak other languages can either use the English version of the worksheet, or your district has the option of translating the content into another language. And for districts that want to do that, there'll be a blank template of the worksheet that you can drop the translated text into. The adult document that you see on the right-hand side has is a more detailed document, and it helps you supports you as you talk to students and walk them through the worksheet. There's 3 topics that we've explored: experiencing low mood, feeling stressed, and building resilience. Let's look at the experiencing low mood worksheet in a bit more detail. It includes an introduction to the topic, everyday strategies based on best available evidence, practical tips, and an area for the students to make plans for change. The document is meant to open the door to a deeper conversation with an adult, and we're looking at it in English, but as I mentioned, many of the students will be looking at it in their home language. In the low mood worksheet, we discuss 5 ideas. We help the students understand the difference between low mood and depression. We discuss 3 strategies for helping to boost their mood: physical activity, relaxation, and healthy behaviors. We also reinforce how important it is to reach out in a crisis and provide information on BC's free multilingual mental health line. As I said in the previous slide, the worksheet encourages students to plan actions based on the information. The corresponding adult worksheets, adult documents are about 10 to 15 pages long. They provide background on the topic. They walk you through the conversation with the student, suggest follow-up actions for individual students, identify program-wide strategies, and they also provide a resource list that has additional background for the adult and hands-on learning for the student. The purpose of the adult pages is to make it easier for the adult to have this conversation with a student they are worried about, so they are prepared, confident, and comfortable in talking with a student. For each adult document, we provide an overview of the key ideas on the first page. So for experiencing low mood, the key points are: if a low mood persists for more than 2 weeks and impacts a student's ability to function, they may be depressed. A diagnosis of depression can only be made by a medical professional. In BC, the first step would be to go to a family practice doctor or a pediatrician, whoever is the primary caregiver for the student. Depression is usually caused by a combination of factors and cannot always be prevented. However, the risk is reduced when students have social connections, a sense of belonging and purpose, and constructive and adaptive ways of coping with their problems. Depression affects one's appetite, sleep patterns, and concentration. It also leads to feelings of guilt, hopelessness, worthlessness, and in severe cases, self-harm or suicide. Depression is treatable, but it is not something that people can just get over on their own. A person's ability and willingness to get treatment affects the length of the depression. Timely treatment is essential as it minimizes disruptions to a student's education. Teachers and international student program staff are not mental health professionals. However, they play a crucial role in recognizing shifts in mood in a student and noticing when these fluctuations are out of character. Their ongoing support can also make a big difference for a student struggling with a mood problem. Everyday practices and skill buildings can help all students maintain or improve their mood. As I mentioned, the document walks the adult through the conversation with the student. Here you see the first section of the student worksheet highlighted, knowing it's more than a low mood. The document reminds the adult what they should hope to learn from this part of the student discussion. It provides guiding questions and things they should be looking for. Here's another section farther along in the document on sleep and healthy behaviors. In this section, it tells you that secondary students need 8 to 10 hours of sleep per night, and then provides some questions to help explore the student's sleep habits and technology use at night. Follow-up actions are suggested. For example, if the student is having suicidal thoughts or self-harming, immediately follow your school or district's protocol. If you think that the student is depressed, based on the criteria in the document, then it's recommended that you follow your program's protocol for seeking medical help, to seek diagnosis or additional help. For students who do not appear to be depressed, the advice is to continue to have frequent and regular check-ins with the student to check on symptoms and see if they're trying some of the strategies in the worksheet. Also, to work with the classroom teacher on ways to support the student. As well as providing strategies for individual students, the adult document also provides system-wide strategies to consider. These are not in-the-moment crisis strategies, but more upstream strategies that focus on preventing crisis and promoting the well-being of all students. Once again, embedding mental well-being is important. Designing your international student program to foster strong connections between students and adults helps prevent depression and encourages students to reach out for help before there is a crisis. Address bullying. I know that all schools are on top of bullying issues. However, low mood and depression can be linked to bullying, so we really need to point that out. Thirdly, developing and implementing a protocol for students struggling with mood issues will ensure they get the best possible support. The protocol should align with existing district school protocols for students experiencing mental health problems. It should also consider when and how the parents are informed and whether local medical diagnosis or treatment will be sought. Nurturing life skills. Learning opportunities that help develop realistic thinking, problem solving, goal setting, positive coping, and stress management skills can help all students manage their mood. However, they provide the most benefit to those students who are struggling. And now that you have a sense of what the worksheets look like, I'm going to quickly go through the highlights of the other two worksheets. So the key points of the Feeling Stressed worksheet are: everyone experiences stress in their life. While stress can have positive effects, such as protecting us from danger, long-term stress can contribute to serious health problems, including anxiety and depression. Because they are experiencing the pressures of adapting to a new environment and new culture, international students can be vulnerable to higher levels of stress. Everyday practices and skill building can help students maintain or improve their ability to manage stress. Getting enough sleep and physical activity and managing screen time can help reduce stress. Building skills such as time management, problem solving, and goal setting can also help students address the underlying issues that fuel their stress. As always, teachers and program staff have a crucial role in recognizing changes in students and noticing when they are not coping well. Effective strategies for individual students include helping students figure out the underlying sources of their stress. This lets you deal with the real problem, not just the symptoms of the stress. For example, if you can figure out the stress is related to getting assignments done on time, then you can determine whether it's their English language skills holding them back or their time management skills. From there, you can address the real problem. Using calming strategies. Teaching students to use calming strategies like mindfulness can help them deal with everyday stress in the moment. For example, before a test. Maintain a healthy lifestyle. Students are better able to manage their stress if they get regular physical activity, enough sleep, eat healthy, and manage their screen time. Make time to relax. Encourage students to build time into their schedule for relaxation, as it will help them reduce their stress levels. Teaching students to reach out for help when they need it is an important strategy. Chronic stress can lead to depression. You want students to know that they don't need to be able to handle everything on their own, and that reaching out to a trusted adult or a friend when they are feeling overwhelmed is a good thing and completely normal and acceptable in Canadian society. The program-wide strategies that support students in managing their stress include designing your program to embed mental well-being such that all students have a sense of belonging, social connections, and a robust support network. Encourage the use of everyday healthy lifestyle and stress management strategies, such as regular physical activity, good sleep habits, calming practices, and managing screen time. Intentional skill building can help students manage their stress. Basically, same skills as you saw in low mood, stress management, social emotional learning, and executive function skills. Now looking at the Building Resilience worksheet, the key points for building resilience are: resilience is the ability to bounce back from adversity. Personal, family, and environmental factors shape how resilient someone is. Strong adult-student relationships, a sense of self-efficacy, and well-developed self-regulation and executive function skills are protective factors that contribute to students' resilience. Those same factors are at the heart of the BC curriculum, both in its focus on belonging and in its core competencies. Resilience can be situation specific, with students managing some types of challenges exceptionally well and others less well. For example, a student might be more resilient when dealing with academic issues, but be significantly less resilient when managing friendship problems. Once again, teachers and international student program staff play a crucial role in recognizing changes in students and noticing when they are not bouncing back from challenges. Their ongoing support can also make a big difference in developing a student's resilience. We've talked a lot about the importance of the student-adult relationship, but we haven't really described what it looked like. Trusted adults can be teachers, homestay parents, counselors, or other adults from school. Their role is to make themselves available to the student, be interested in their life and success, actively listen to their concerns, model positive self-talk and other strategies for dealing with challenges, and to advocate for them where appropriate. It's pretty simple, and it's largely what people are intuitively doing, but it's done in a more intentional way, making sure that all students have someone that they are connected to. The strategies for building resilience in international students are making and maintaining strong connections with friends, families, and other adults. It increases resilience and makes it easier to reach out when they need help, encouragement, or support. Self-care. Caring for yourself and your health supports your resilience. Again, this is basic healthy lifestyle things we've been talking about: physical activity, sleep, healthy food, spending time with friends, and doing activities they enjoy. All of those things contribute to building resilience. Keep perspective. Part of becoming more resilient is learning to have a balanced and realistic perspective, one that challenges negative thoughts that can undermine confidence. This skill can be learned, and the worksheet points to some good resources that students can use to develop theirs. When I think about the two remaining strategies, I think about Carol Dweck's work on growth mindset. Being persistent in working towards goals and learning from failure helps students push through challenges and builds their resilience. These are skills that students are learning every day in BC classrooms. Some international students may need additional support and practice to master these skills, as they may not have been as widely embraced in their home country as they are in BC. The system-wide strategies for building resilience reflect what I've already said in previous sections, ensuring that all students have a sense of belonging, social connections, and strong connections to caring adults. I've also talked about skill building in other sections. For building resilience, the specific skills that are most important are executive function and self-regulation skills. These are the skills that allow us to plan, focus attention, prioritize tasks, and set and achieve goals and control impulses. In BC, most students are learning some of these skills in elementary school and continue building on them throughout their time in school. Students coming from other countries may be behind BC students in this area. It's important to notice this so that additional supports can be provided if needed. The final document that we have developed is a resource directory. It's meant to put accurate health information at the fingertips of program staff. It covers 8 main topics broken into 23 categories, and in front of you on the screen you see the 23 categories. The main 8 categories are healthy eating, life balance and time management, mental health, physical activity, sexual orientation and gender identity, sleep, stress, and technology. The directory is sorted by topic and provides a description of the resource and a link to it, the languages that it's available in, whether the resource is for students or adults or both. For students, resources available in English language, in English only. The reading level is provided to help you quickly assess whether it's suitable for your student or not. To end, I want to recap the 6 strategies for supporting the well-being of all of your international students. You are probably really sick of them by now. It's foster connections, embed mental well-being, encourage healthy lifestyles, help students develop life skills, build capacity to comfortably talk about mental health, support students to improve their English language skills. By building these skills into your program, the students will feel more supported and they will be better able to manage their well-being, and you will have less crises to deal with. Thank you, and now I'd like to turn things over to my colleague, Rhonda.
Thank you very much, Kim, for doing that. For many of you, once you see that this resource has been released, you're going to find that it's an exceptional tool for the international programs. We haven't had this in the past, and so moving forward, this is going to be a very important tool. I'm just going to share my screen quickly with a document that I have created for our district. Just in terms of what Kim had said, many of the Canadian students have already had a background with mental health. Many of our international students may not be coming with this information or their perception. So I really believe going forward that strengthening mental health services infrastructure for our international students will therefore be key for student retention, success, and an important aspect of recruitment as we move through this and the later stages of the pandemic. We may find that next year we're going to have kids that are more in crisis after this last year of everything they've gone through. I put a link which is out there now, but to the ministry and what Kim has been working on. But this is a reminder for my advisors or my counselors, my home state coordinators, that if they need a perspective from an Eastern Asian perspective or from a Latin American, this is where they can learn their skills and or just to build that. So taking with the program strategies that Kim had mentioned, how do we take this working document and personalize it for our own programs? So I've broken it down into the groups. And I think one of the key things that Kim has really stressed is that we need to build strong support systems. And this needs to happen even before our students arrive. And so many of us have a pre-arrival app. Maybe we start to put that information about mental health and wellness and what that means. So it's part of our everyday conversation moving forward in our program. It's not that we just present it when we are presented with issues for students. So a key thing is in your app, introducing your key members, allowing them to connect with host families or your school advisor. When we have our orientation, spend the time here, speak about mental health, being well while you are going to be here. You can address homesickness and acculturation. You can create a buddy program so that we have students, Canadian students, that are working with students. And I think this really speaks to having 2+ adults or connections for the kids. So when we are working with issues, it's really important to speak to the students. Who can you speak to when you have an issue? Strengthening the language skills, we all are doing that within our program. But what I really love about Kim's work is that there are going to be worksheets that are going to be in their own language. So if languages are a barrier for helping kids with mental health, we can speak to them from an English sheet and they can look at it from Mandarin, Japanese, Korean, or Vietnamese, and we're on the same page. So I think that's going to be very helpful for us moving forward. Fostering connections, again, having those 2 key adults, student ambassadors, and who are the people that they can go to, but also getting them involved in sports and clubs. We know how important that is. That allows them to make Canadian friends much quickly. Watching for any changes in mood or their appearance. How can we improve their coping skills? So for here is, if a student is feeling stressed, there is a personal stress plan that they can create. Talking about time management skills, because doing homework, trying to get everything done, trying to meet their family's expectations may be very difficult. Creating a plan to get things done, coping with stress, breathing, thinking of solutions, asking for help, introducing study skills, which maybe our international students have never had before, so helping them. And encouraging healthy lifestyles. Kim spoke at length with this, how this is really, really important for them. Healthy eating. I find that sometimes with our international students, it's quick for them to buy junk food and store that in their room rather than eating nutritional meals. So just maybe speaking with regards to that. The physical activity, so that they're not in their room, they're not gaming all the time, they're getting out, they're being involved, trying to find out what they can do, and just even committing to 20 minutes a day for exercise may make a difference in their mental health. The sleep and the screen time, we know that our kids are linked to their phone in our own country and in their country. And so this is overwhelming sometimes. They're on different time zones, so they are not sleeping properly. So just some strategies to put in place and helping a student to realize that they need to get those 7 to 8 hours every night, and how can they do that? So some tips. And the last one, building resiliency. I really love Kim's worksheets that are on here, because it's about giving the kids the tools and the power for them to take control of their mental health. But setting goals, make sure that they're smart, specific, measurable, achievable, results-oriented, and time-based. Tackling problems rather than just avoiding them, and bouncing back. So how can we learn from our mistakes? How can we grow from those, and learn that failure is part of growth and moving forward? So that's just a simple tool that our staff can use, and make sure that we're talking about it even before they arrive and throughout their entire program. So mental health, when issues do happen, we're not in crisis mode, and we're finding that we're at a situation where we cannot help them, and it's better for them to go home than to remain with us. So we're hoping that we can prevent this from happening. And that's it. So thank you.
Hi, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Rhonda, for that presentation. Now I'd like to pass it over to Laura for you to present as well. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Gabriel. And I'm going low tech today, so it's just me here. So I'm Laura Schwartfiger, and I'm speaking to you from the Sauk School District on Vancouver Island, which rests on the traditional territories of the Coast Salish, specifically Esquimalt Nation and Songhees Nation. So a huge thanks to Kim and the team for putting this together. The value is incredible, and I know that we're all really looking forward to when those worksheets are published in the coming months. The thing that I'm going to be speaking about is something for consideration for some school districts that our school district embarked on a couple of years ago, and that was a position that we created dedicated to supporting the health and wellness of international students. And it's currently unfilled due to COVID and the reduction that we had in student numbers, but we're very much looking forward to having that position filled again. And I wanted to recognize that every school district and international program is structured slightly differently. So I'll tell you a little bit about how that worked for us in our school district. So our support structure is we generally have around 280 FTE. We run our own homestay program. We have 2 administrators and 3 homestay or activity coordinators, 2 clerical staff, and then school-based international student teacher advisors in our high schools, which are structured slightly differently in each of our 3 schools. And then also usually a school-based counselor who has international students as part of their larger caseload, including domestic students. And so looking back a couple of years ago and why this position was created was that there were a number of students with mental health challenges that we were struggling to support. And there were a number of cases where it felt like it would have been possible to support the students and not, need them to go back to their home country. But they weren't necessarily going to be better off going back home, but we didn't have the resources here within our school district to be able to support them through some of these things, like the homesickness and the acculturation stress and low mood. And there were gaps that we had identified. School counselors have busy schedules and large caseloads. There's also sometimes a disparity in terms of cultural sensitivity, cultural familiarity. These resources didn't exist a couple of years ago, and so we didn't really have as many tools as we do now to be able to increase the capacity of our staff. And also our international teacher advisors weren't necessarily equipped to support ongoing mental health conversations because that's not necessarily their role. So this was a role for us that was very, very helpful, and we definitely noticed a significant improvement. And in terms of connecting this position to the guidelines, one of the recommendations in the guidelines is building the capacity of program staff to speak comfortably mental health. And that was something that our mental health or our health and wellness coordinator definitely did. We had regular team meetings where she was helping to educate the rest of our team in the areas of mental health. And we did mindfulness sessions as a team. She was also doing mindfulness sessions with student groups. And she would also facilitate workshops with homestay parents to educate them as well about different aspects of health and wellness for international students. Another recommendation in the guidelines talks about taking the lead in embedding well-being across the program, and that was something that this position really was able to do as well. So I mentioned the mindfulness sessions for students, and really she was doing a lot of one-on-one sessions with students to have conversations with them to develop their executive function skills, and just to kind of start that conversation around mental health, you know, and had that cultural sensitivity, even without these resources, but knowing and being familiar with the different backgrounds of the international students in our program. And then one of the things that Kim mentioned in one of the slides was just that catching problems early. Having this position enabled us to take more of a proactive approach rather than a reactive approach. And we felt that that was something that was, you know, really contributing to some of the challenges that we were experiencing a few years ago. And so being able to do those routine wellness check-ins on a very regular basis to catch those problems early was something that was very helpful for us. So I know that we in our district, we're very excited for when the worksheets become public and when they're in their final form. And I know that they would have definitely been a great tool that our health and wellness coordinator would have used in her conversations with students. And I know that they will be used for sure moving forward. So that's it for me. I'm going to pass it over, I think, to Karen next.
Thanks, Laura. Yeah, so just as Laura said, acknowledge that every program has a slightly different tact or approach to how they structure their program. I know many of us are very hesitant to accept students who acknowledge on an application form have some mental health challenges or a mental health background, simply because we don't have the capacity necessarily to do that, to deal with that either within our schools or within our homestays. And for some of us as custodians of students, there certainly is a risk management aspect to that. That being said, we all know that as either as students progress in their program, or sometimes because things are neglected or downplayed on an application form, we do see that students have mental health challenges. So these documents are important to help us structure these conversations. One of the things that we have struggled with a little bit in our program is the amount of time we front load with our staff when students arrive. We do a personal registration with our students, of course, orientations. And as I've gone through this process with Kim, it's really made me stand back and say, yes, we're always exhausted at the end of August and the year's just beginning, but the importance of that time that we front load, those connections are so important. So we do private registration with all of our students. We do orientations, but really at the end of those orientations and that registration, students know who to contact. They know how to contact them. They know that our staff are real helping people who are there. And it allows them, it makes it easier for students to reach out. The other flip side of that is, as educators, we all know that when we go on a field trip with students or even do a Zoom orientation with students, we're often left at the end of it going, we've got to watch that one, because simply us being around students really highlights to us the ones that are the amber flags or even the red flags right from the beginning. Even in the Zoom orientations this year, our staff have been able to peg where our areas of concerns out, and then put the word out to our homestay coordinators, put the word out to the schools, just sort of keep an eye open for the student, maybe start those conversations as a sort of preventative or proactive approach to keep things from keep things manageable before they, as Rhonda said, go downhill and we're ending up having to send a student home because it's beyond our capacity to take care of them. And yes, so this has been true even in the Zoom environment. And of course, it's important to have school-based staff involved in that as well. I think it's good to have the level of the program staff and the school-based staff. Our staff are aware of the cultural nuances that students show that sometimes school-based staff aren't aware of, but then school-based staff are the boots on the ground, the grassroots that are really there every day where the students are accessing them. I really appreciate these materials because what I hear a lot of times from counselors, and I was a counselor at a school that had a large proportion of South Asian, Punjabi students. And when I started counseling, I was constantly in my head thinking about cultural sensitivities and where am I able to go, where am I not able to go, how am I able to establish trust, am I being disingenuous, what part does culture actually play in this exchange? And I came to a time after a couple of years where I was comfortable where I sat with that, and I think the students were as well. But I do know that some of our counselors, especially our new counselors, aren't comfortable when an international student comes into their office. They're either worried about the language barrier or they're worried about the cultural nuances and those cultural beliefs about mental well-being. And so I think these worksheets particularly provide a really safe structure for either school-based staff or even our staff who are newer and maybe less experienced to have safe, productive conversations with that script, which really helps guide them, and I think is a safety feature for many of the adults in having those conversations and you know, keeping things moving in a comfortable way for them. So, and finally, the directory. We did look at a lot of these resources are ones that the schools are giving kids as well. But I think what's helpful, and Kim reminded me of this when I pointed out the MindShift app to her, and she said, hey, but Karen, the language level on that, it's quite high. And I thought, oh yeah, right. So I think having that language piece in there is really useful so that we're not just recommending, and schools aren't just recommending the resources they recommend to all students, that they really are tailored to the needs, the language level of the students there. So this is a huge addition to our programs and our ability to have kids be successful, not just academically, but in so many other ways. So again, thanks to all of those who were involved in starting this project and fulfilling it.
Thank you so much, Karen. And we're at the end of the presentation, so thank you so much to all the panelists for sharing your thoughts and the resources that we just went through. And I would like to open up this session for questions as well. So I'm aware that some of you have been typing your questions in the Q&A function or the chat function, but I'd like to welcome if folks have more questions to type them in at this point, since it's now the time to ask those questions. So I do see that there have been some questions just asking a bit more of clarity around the time frame of when the resources or the worksheets will be available. So Kim, just wondering if you could provide us with a bit more information around, again, what worksheets will be coming out and when could we expect those to be available on the ministry's website?
The phase 1 materials are available now, and you've seen the links to those. The phase 2 materials will be available before the next school year. So kind of in the coming months, there's quite a bit of work left to do, translation, all of those things. So they'll be there for next fall, and I'm pretty confident that as soon as they're available, the ministry will let people know.
That's good. I'm sure that many of us are looking forward to those worksheets as expressed in the comments in the chat function.
The directory, the same schedule. So.
Okay, then there is a comment here that I'd like to get your opinions on. This comment says, I'm curious if other school districts have noticed a decline in homesickness with the having to stay with your family bubbles. I'm finding this is helping the students to feel more comfortable more connected to their host family, and that's one of the probable reasons they're not feeling homesick. So I'd like to get your opinion about this. What do you think?
I'll jump in since no one else is. We've noticed something similar for many of our students, not necessarily our students that have been here for now a year through the summer and into a second year without going home. We're seeing some struggles there, but certainly with homestay families having to engage more and students having to engage with their host families, it certainly has been less homesickness and certainly better connections on that front, I would say this year. And something that we're certainly looking at, how do we keep that spirit of connectivity on that front going? Because very true, we've been talking about school here, but the host families and their engagement and those connections do play a big role in student well-being and health, and also alerting us when there are challenges that students are facing.
And that certainly reflects the research that kids do better with homesickness when they have authentic connections in their new place. It helps them fit in and relieves lots of stress, and also makes them be less lonely.
And I would echo Karen's experience as well. We've seen really deeper connections happening between international students and their host families. I think the piece that is still contributing sometimes to some homesickness or low mood is more of the social aspect for teenagers, right? Where they don't have that social ability, but definitely the host connections are quite strong.
Thank you so much. Amazing. Okay, so then I have another question, and it's about what are the 3 most important things a program could do to support the mental well-being of international students? So the 3 top things that you would recommend a program to do to support mental health.
So I would say those top 6 topics that we saw so many times in the presentation, I would pick from there. And you know, from my perspective, I would really focus on that 2 connections to everyday adults, so the fostering connections, building staff capacity to be comfortable talking about and supporting mental well-being. And I could pick all the other 4, but I would say that improving English language is so important because it's such a barrier to kids who can't make friends. So I guess that would be my top picks.
One thing moving forward for our program is I really want to work with our advisors and even our counselors at our school, because I think when international students go to school counselors, as Karen mentioned, they're uncomfortable with helping the international students. They maybe have different concerns in talking with them, so they will put them back to the advisor. And so I think that counselors have immense knowledge with mental health. And so I really would like to engage our counselors to help. And I think showing them these worksheets and to be able to say, here's a tool, and it is also in another language. So don't feel that the language is what's stopping you from helping the student as you would normally help a Canadian student. So I'm looking forward to doing a little bit more staff development and also with our homestay coordinators. So it just becomes an everyday language. We're looking at mental health right from the gamut, right from the get-go. And it's not something we just pull out of our hat when we have to. It's always part of our language throughout the entire year.
Thank you so much, Rhonda. Absolutely. I welcome everyone. If you have any last questions, we have time to take about 1 or 2 more questions at this time, if you have any. I want to remind you all that we are recording this session and that the recording will be shared shortly after the session will be posted on the BCCIE's YouTube channel, along with the resources that Kim and Rhonda and Laura and Karen, of course, have addressed as well. So we will share those PDFs in the email after the session as well. So just want to remind you all of that too. And just want to ask Kim, maybe at this point, before, while we wait for 1 more question, if you have any more commentaries or perhaps got or resources for people to engage, or tips for people to engage with these documents that are now posted on the ministry's website?
You know, one thing that I would suggest for people to do is to really start looking in their district or their school for those people who are already experts in mental well-being, as Rhonda mentioned. You know, there's a lot of depth in our districts now. So many, most every district has had teachers participate in the go-to-teacher training around mental well-being for secondary students. So there's a lot of expertise within your own districts on social emotional learning, mental health literacy, all kinds of things. So I would really say that take the materials that we've already got available and the ones that are coming, but use those with you know, alongside the expertise you have in your district. There's just a ton there if you can connect with it and work together.
Thanks, Kim. And then there's one more comment about staff development, being very important. So this question is asking if there's more, if there are further thoughts about this. Maybe I'll pass it over to Laura or Karen for any complimentary or for any comments about staff development on your end.
This has been an interesting process for us because as people in international education know that you sort of operate in a silo in your school district. And this certainly with the publication of the first phase of materials has opened up some conversations between ourselves and our inclusive learning department. And we don't know where that's going to go, but certainly there is we're moving in that direction and looking at how we can work together to do some staff development for specifically our school-based staff who aren't necessarily as embedded and breathing the international student life as we are every day. So more to follow.
And I think from our end, similar as well. One of the things that we had discussed was once all of the documents are published, is really focusing on that building capacity within our counseling teams that Rhonda had kind of mentioned as well. And so offering some professional development sessions, perhaps in coordination with our inclusive education department, but really to build that capacity so that we're not operating in silos and having you know, students constantly funneled back to the advisors, but really where as a broader system, we're helping more of our staff and educators and counselors to feel more comfortable working with our international students.
Gabrielle, I just wanted to address, I see that Sandra Chun in the chat and looking for more informed strategies. I think for Laura and Karen and I, we've had the luxury of looking at Kim's work and going through it. And so I find once this is released, you're going to be able to go through that document, and she does have informed strategies that are in there. And I think you need to pull what'll work best for your program. And that's what I kind of did with our document. It's just specific points that I put out there that I want us to focus on. But there are some great strategies that are in there. You're just kind of getting the, you know, the preview of what's to come, but it is a really well documented, like tons of information. And I think you're going to find what's more specific for your program.
Thank you, Rhonda. And thank you again, everyone, and the panelists specifically for your time and for your resources today. With that, I think we will wrap up this session. So I just want to remind everyone that at BCCIE, we continue offering more programs, and our next session will be on April 27th. It's a webinar on internationalization and indigenization, tensions and collaborations. If you are interested in attending this session, so I welcome you to register. And again, thanks. Thank you all for your time, and thanks to all the panelists for joining us today. So with that, I'd like to remind everyone that there will be a feedback survey that will pop up on your screen after closing the session, and we welcome you to fill it out. Please let us know how you like the sessions, and have a good day. Thanks, everyone.